Hey everybody, welcome to night 4. And we started right at 9:30 too. I hope that you've been enjoying the story so far. We are, of course, reading The Children of Arc, a book by me with help from my dear wife Carey. Here she is, Volume 1 in the Calipar Fantasy series. Very excited to dive right back in where we left off. So, as usual, I am going to post the link to buy in the comment section. Please know that if you are considering buying the book, if you like what you hear or you want to share it with somebody else who you think might be interested, or if you read it and you want to post a review, please know that that is immensely helpful to independent authors such as myself. So thank you very much. Let me just go to Facebook real quick to check that the stream is looking good. Okay. Alrighty, let's get started. We are in chapter 7 of The Children of Arc. Kevin's father brought a burlap sack out of the closet and slammed it down on the kitchen table, knocking their cards in the box all over the floor. Kevin gasped and knelt to gather them all up. Is this everything? Yes, Evelyn said. What's going on? Kevin said. He held up the cards in defeat, his eyes pleading with his parents. He held up the game set. This is my brother's game set. For a moment, Roger's eyes softened. He knelt before Kevin, took hold of his shoulders, and kissed him on his forehead. Listen, son, listen. I'll explain. Kevin had started crying. He was clutching the box of cards, just not understanding what was coming for them, why they couldn't just keep playing at the kitchen table. I love you very, very much, Kevin, and I don't want you to end up like your brothers, so we have to protect our house. Can you help me? Kevin's eyes looked swollen with tears. But what, Kevin? I need you to be strong. Go with your mother, do what she tells you, secure the house. Go. So he went with his mother and did what his father said. Wherever she went, he followed, and whatever she did, he helped with. They barred the back door with the furniture and pulled out all the plugs in the entertainment center to prevent any extra lights from going on. They covered the windows with sheets that his mother secured with duct tape. For a while, Kevin looked up through their diamond-shaped windows and saw a black cloud high above the house. Then he heard buzzing. At first, he thought it was cicadas migrating out of the area. Then he noticed the subtle differences in the sound. It was a deep rumble over the commotion, and then the cloud over their house started to get closer, and he realized it wasn't a cloud. He did hear buzzing, but it was mixed with something else. Was it purring? Yes, it was like buzzing mixed with purring. It's all right, his mother kept telling him. It's all right. It's going to be all right. I know, Kevin hissed. But the noise continued above the house. So far, it didn't seem like anything landed on the roof. They might have passed them by. Yet, through the walls, he could hear the neighbors screaming. The family quietly entered the garage. His mother pulled back a tarp to reveal a set of gardening tools. She took out the tools and revealed a scary selection of very sharp knives, which she picked up carefully by their black handles. Be careful with these. Take them to your father. Do you think Adria's okay? Kevin asked her, but his mother shushed him. Through the garage door, a sound like a sledgehammer shattering concrete came in a steady, swift motion until he heard his mother's vegetable garden being torn out. Oh no, he mumbled. She shushed him. Her grip was tighter than he'd ever known, like he'd die if she let him go. Mom, he whispered, trying to get free. Kevin, please. A shrieking roar blasted through the garage door. There was a crash as the door imploded, and two enormous rows of serrated teeth bit through it. Only the faintest light came into the room. just enough to see the scaly head and shoulders now tearing through what remained of their door. It looked like an alligator. It towered over them with scales of many different colors, maroon at the neck and stomach, bronze at the breasts and head, and scales around its eyes were red as blood. The creature opened its jaws and drooled acidic saliva onto the floor, filling the room with a thick, pungent odor. The garage door burst open. "Get away from my son!" His father fired his weapon. 6 bullets smashed the monster's head. He never knew his father could attack with such force, just like the soldiers in his favorite war movies. But it didn't work. As Kevin looked on, the beast shook off the bullets, and they each fell to the ground like pebbles. The monster licked its teeth and fixed its eye on Kevin's father. Kevin now felt very small, as he trembled with fear. "Kevin, run!" Roger called. Then the beast sprang on them, and Kevin screamed. "Run, Kevin!" Evelyn called, and she sprang towards the beast herself. He obeyed. As he moved towards the street, his mother caught the beast's eye. It lowered its chin and roared, sounding nothing like a hissing alligator. The low thrumming spurred those around Kevin to action. They left their houses and charged up Cicada Hill. The beast's paws glowed like gold, then struck the earth. The earth quaked, and Kevin's mother stumbled, and his father kept firing fruitless rounds at the beast. Bullet after bullet fell to the earth in a million pieces as the beast twitched. Then it rounded on Roger, who ran backwards into the house. But its tail came around and struck Kevin's ankle. She stumbled and fell backwards into the street. Kevin ran to her. But there was another earthquake. The fleeing mob of people reached her first. They nearly trampled Kevin as they rampaged towards Peak's edge, the creature's roar overpowering them all. Kevin dodged 2 escaping people like a ball player, but the third tackled him and threw him to the ground. For a few moments, he was very still, waiting for them all to pass. When they did, all he could hear were the sounds of his house being destroyed. He looked up, and as it happened, his eyes fell straight down Cicada Hill, which was now covered with a dim cloud. More people were coming. He only had so much time. He crawled towards his mother, but she was laying still in the middle of the street. "Mom," he wheezed, his back and neck throbbing. "Mom, I'm here." He reached her, but she didn't respond. When he saw his mother's face, he wondered at first if he'd found the wrong person. He thought he'd spun round too fast and run into someone else's yard. When he touched her shoulder, she remained still as a rock. And then he touched her hand, the soft tips of her fingers, which used to rub his back when he was drifting off to sleep. And finally, Kevin rolled her over and saw her eyes, and he collapsed into tears. "Oh, Mom, wake up, please. Mom." But she just laid there, staring past him and towards the stars. When the room began to overflow, the regulars became more aggressive. They pushed people out of the way and crowded the doors, slamming them all shut, even with people still outside. Those trapped outside raised their hands and waved their arms, their voices coming through the glass door. "Let us in! Let us in!" The sirens continued to drone, and the terror in their voices only increased. "Don't leave us out here! You can't! The room is full! Get to your safe zone," said one of the regulars, which provoked more pounding on the door. "Mercy! Mercy! You can't leave us out here!" Richard couldn't see their faces through the crowded room. He was relieved to be granted that small mercy, because their voices penetrated him and made him feel wretched. It could have been him out there, just as he had once been when he was lost out on the trail of blood. But he didn't know what to do now. A wall of people blocked the door, and he couldn't fight past them. That would just leave them all at the mercy of the beasts. Besides, he'd been taught to survive. Richard built distance from the noise. He knew the way upstairs to the manager's office. It was a small wooden door with a flimsy lock. Attempting to be quiet, he broke the door open and vanished into the darkness. As he climbed the wooden steps, the voices below came through the ceiling like a rushing sandstorm, but he could no longer make out their words. He sighed in relief and went to the window. Now he could see far down the street. The sky had filled with gray clouds, darkening the atmosphere of Ark, which now sported people gathering in crowds In addition to the gym doors, they gathered far east at the Claymore Circle and far west at the Ramsey Medical Center. At either side, he saw those blaring red sirens, coloring the town red. Below, he saw the people who had just been at the gym doors. There were at least 12 of them, all Main Streeters. He could tell by their leather vests, their spiked wristbands, their piercing, their tattoos. These were tough people who would have decried Richard as the silent giant. But right now, they'd arrived at the gym too late, and they were scattering like rats across the sandy streets, looking for any door that was still open to them. Some hid under trash cans, while others ran up darkened alleys. The siren started to drone again, but this time the sound was overtaken. Richard knelt behind the window, hiding himself from sight, as a deep roar sailed down Market Street. The last few shops that had been slow to dim their lights now blacked out. The curtains were all drawn, and as cops on both sides of the long road continued speaking their orders, he saw a shadow appear on the ground. There were 4 loud crashes against the roof of this very building, and dust fell into the dark office in streams. A creature leapt off the roof and landed in the center of the street. An enormous creature, about 2 shirt sizes larger than Richard himself, coming in at no less than 300 pounds. Its body was shaped very much like an elk, with broad horizontal figure, sporting 4 bony legs which stood on muddy hooves. Its fur was dark brown, mangled and knotted. Its vertebrae was laced with little hooked daggers sticking up through the skin, all gleaming like diamonds. Richard's eyes fell to the beast's antlers. At least the ones his brother had showed him were typically curved like sickles, if they belonged to a real elk. Each formed a series of tines, different for different breeds. Richard was used to seeing about 4 tines per antler. On this one, he saw at least 6. Actually, there were 6 on the left and 8 on the other. The 6-antler tine curved in a straight vertical line into a straight vertical line. The 8-antlered tine was huge, overtaking the other, 3 of its tines meeting above the creature's head, as if it wore a crown. Every inch of them were serrated like knives, glowing in the light of the gym, whose lights had gone out just a second too late. The creature faced the building with wide, bloodshot eyes, and as it opened its vast maw and revealed its rotting teeth and swollen gums, Richard saw its eyes rolled backwards in its head. That was enough to do him in. He remembered this, how they looked as if they were already dead, like their bodies were just being moved by some other force. As Richard moved away from the window and covered his ears, he heard the elk beast crash through the doors of the gym. All the people downstairs flew into a frenzy, shaking the building. As the beast trampled, it only took a few moments. Mankind's predator was known for one thing besides its insatiable hunger: rage. Highly intelligent predators given to fits of anger like no human could comprehend. It wouldn't stop until everybody in the gym went still, and it could tear at their flesh and bone at its leisure. Richard remained as still as a statue, with no sunset to watch or any wind to listen to. The sounds beneath him were of carnage and slaughter. When the very last person started to shriek the word "help," Richard heard their mouths fill with their own blood. And all that from one beast. Richard thought it might stay and feast on the well over 50 bodies crowding the gym. Instead, it ran out into the streets. And Richard heard voices again, the same voices from the door. He shut his eyes as he listened to each of them die too, chased and pounced on as they fled west towards the hospital. Then, at last, Richard heard the sounds of fangs gnawing at flesh. He felt sick. The fear of discovery alone kept his bile down. He'd heard all of this before, even if his mind couldn't form the exact memories. The sounds were the same. He could even start to smell the same stench through the walls. Blood, excrement, bile. The beast finished off its victims and then vomited their remains all over the street, making room for more. When he dared glance out the window, he saw the beast vomit, a mixture of red blood and black ooze, spattered the street in various places as it continued heading west. He needed to go east, to get out. Richard's body was numb, but he found some courage and went out the door to the fire escape. As soon as he stepped outside, Ark's new odor assailed him. Rotting viscera. That was what Ark's atmosphere had become. He cupped a hand over his mouth and nose, fearing the smell alone would infect him as he sped down the fire escape and made it to the street. We'll pause there. I'll check the comment section, make sure nobody's yelling at me about the video being muted. Oh, yes, that is the Gators. Absolutely. Okay. If you're enjoying the story, please give the video a heart or a like, maybe give it a share it with somebody, invite somebody to the stream if you think they might enjoy listening. Please do, the more the merrier. Okay, let's continue. The creature's back was turned to him, so he started heading east as planned. But before he left, he glanced inside the gym. Not only had the glass doors been shattered, along with all the windows, but the brick walls had been gnashed, allowing him to see far into the rear of the room. Bodies were piled up on top of each other, slung over the overturned workout machines. The steel rods he would grip while weightlifting were snapped in half. The stench from within was like a graveyard of open caskets. He ran from it. He ran as fast as he could. Seeing all those bodies, continuing to hear roars and chirps all throughout the city, made him think of one thing. He ran through the Claymore Circle, and instead of going straight down Main Street, he turned left down Miller's Alley. He ran past numerous people fleeing from the terrace. His legs carried him fast, just as they had on the trail of blood when he first left home, accused of murdering his brother and father. He came to the bridge at Peak's Ends and smelled the same stench rising out of the terrace. From the top of the hill, he saw huge houses afire, with huge bugs the size of his palm flying in and out of the destroyed windows. There were bodies at the bottom of the hill. Still holding his nose, Richard made it halfway down the hill, and the next thing he saw began to break him. "The house," he muttered, almost in tears. Roger and Evelyn's home had collapsed halfway into the garden, filling his nostrils with a dusty scent. Evelyn's tomatoes were all smashed, filling the green garden with a river that looked like blood. The fence had been shattered as well. Sharp bits of wood were scattered about along with broken steel and discarded bullets. Richard took one step into the garden and spotted a body, a woman's body. "No!" He ran over to the lifeless figure and turned her over. "Evelyn!" he cried. She stared up at him with lifeless eyes, unflinching, unblinking. Her mouth hung open, with a line of dry blood falling low. Richard's eyes welled with tears. No. No. This was his fault. They'd brought him here. They'd opened their home to him, but he'd run like a coward. If he'd been here, if he'd stayed with them, he could have protected them. He knew it. Now, all he could do was look down at Evelyn Marlton's corpse. He hugged her close and thought of Roger and Kevin, wherever they were. For all he knew, they were buried under that wreckage, too. His grief welled, and he let out a thundering scream. And that was when he heard a growl behind him. He turned to see a huge, orange, scaly alligator. Much like the elk, it was too large to be a natural beast. Its scales looked as sharp as knives, and its tail whipped back and forth as it studied him with a hungry look. It opened its stinking mouth with bits of clothing stuck to its teeth, and its eyes rolled backwards in its head. Richard turned and ran from the garden, and the earth shook behind him. When he reached the top of the hill and ran across the bridge at Peak's Edge, a heavy wind staggered him. He drifted close to the side and saw down into the 100-foot ravine that separated Ark from the terrace. "Hey, are you crazy?" someone shouted. Looking ahead, he saw a squad of police officers had gathered. They were laying down dynamite sticks across the other end of the bridge. "Get on this side," one of them yelled. Then Richard heard another roar behind him. The beast leapt high into the air. He dug deep into his muscle memory and quickened his pace, monitoring his breathing as he sailed towards the right side of the bridge. By then, the beast had made it halfway across. Richard stumbled, and it hit the ground just as two cops hit two buttons. An ear-splitting crack followed. Richard turned to see the bridge swathed with fire and smoke, its foundation cracked like ice. The gator had almost reached the edge, but now it was sliding backwards as gravity took hold of it, and the bridge's fractured foundation came apart. Richard caught one last look at the creature as it tumbled down. The red slash across the scale of its eyes burned itself into Richard's memory as it fell into the plateau's crevice with an echoing roar. Richard lay on his back, staring up at the cloudy sky and taking his first long, deep breath. "Good somersault, silent giant," said one of the cops, who helped him up. But Richard's comfort was short-lived. He was thinking of Evelyn, choking out tears. "I could have done something," he said. "I should have done something." Evacuating to Destination 6 was no easy feat. The place rested at the bottom of Ark's Plateau on the eastern side of town and was only accessible through the winding road past Phoenix. To avoid traffic jams that would just turn people into frozen targets for mankind's predator, the procedure went like this. Helicopters purchased from Los Angeles lifted the sick high above Ark and rapidly carried them to Destination 6, along with their service workers. The helicopters would then return for the business persons of Ark, who were lifted from the skyscrapers of the box office block. The people on the streets were contained on Destinations 1 through 5, a large warehouse in Phoenix, an elementary school in the Market District, the middle and high schools, a warehouse behind Ramsey Medical Center itself. Once evacuated of all its patients, periodically the choppers, buses, and squad cars dispatched by Chief Sam Hansen would round up the stragglers of Ark and transport them as swiftly as possible to Destination 6, an underground chasm with thick walls and a narrow entrance. Once all of Ark rested in Destination 6, the beasts could tear apart the whole city-state if they wished, but wouldn't touch a single living person who had gotten to safety. Well, there was one obvious problem with that. Stick a beast in the center of Ark, and roads became blocked. People would be trapped. Only segments of Ark's populace would be able to make the journey to safety. That was why the mayor had spoken several times on his radio broadcasts about how Los Angeles soldiers partnered with Ark, were stationed at various desert outposts, so that they could radio in and alert Ark of the need for evacuation long before the beasts reached their borders. Well, that hadn't happened today. The cops were leading him down Miller's Alley in their squad car, going slowly as the sounds of deep roars filled the city. "Crap," said the officer who was driving. "We gotta go around." "Can't go around," said another, seated right next to Richard. "What do you mean?" "Came through on the radio. The exit out of Farmer's Alley is blocked off. Something knocked over a bus and smashed it into 2 apartment buildings." "What thing?" Richard just sat between them, clutching his chest, his grief still blistering. "Didn't get much. Something with antlers. Big antlers." The car cruised through Miller's Alley until the roaring was loud in their ears, even with the windows rolled up. "We have to get out," said one cop. They opened the doors and Richard followed them outside. Down Miller's Alley beyond the Claymore Circle, he heard the noon bells ringing from the clock tower. They entered an alley so congested with trash bags and cans it made the thin walls feel even thinner. What they would do in here, Richard had no idea. Then he noticed one of the cops open the back door to someone's house. They were ushered in, and Richard followed, stepping into an empty apartment. The cops ignored the living room and kitchen areas and went straight up the stairs and passed through a hallway. Richard was brought to a window with a wide wooden board bridging them all into the parallel apartment. Richard followed them across, stepping over another empty, stinking alley. In the next apartment, Richard could see Main Street through the windows. Through 3 larger windows in a caddy corner of the living room, he could see partly into the Claymore Circle. There weren't many service vehicles in Ark, but there went by a few. One was an oil truck that transported huge loads from the oil factory in Los Angeles into the storage warehouses of Ark. But it hadn't completed its trip today. It was laying on its side as fire consumed it, spreading through the circle. "Damn," one of the cops said. Richard, taller than the 4, looked down into the chaos. He saw the Elk. The beast had altered its course and reached the Claymore Circle, smashing 2 squad cars and turning over an oil truck, which was now leaking all over the asphalt. And the beast perched itself on top of the truck and had stuck its head through the oil, guzzling down the substance. Richard knew what would happen if they tried to take one step past that thing. "What do we do?" he heard a cop say. "Wait it out," Richard tried to warn them. "We have to get out while it's distracted," said the leader. "Let's go." "Wait," Richard pleaded, but they didn't listen. Looking out across the circle, he saw smoke clouds rising over Ark. He saw streets torn free of the earth and dirt spattered everywhere. He saw his favorite restaurant, Ark Burger, right on the corner of the Claymore Circle, caved in and destroyed. This one beast had done it all. "Now," said one cop. They rushed to the left and exited out a door that led to a fire escape dangling over Main Street. They stepped carefully. Richard was still clutching his chest, hobbling slightly from the pain. He wondered how much blood he'd already lost as this red stain spread to cover his once white shirt. He balanced himself on the handrail as he funneled down after the cops. The ground came within sight. Only a few more levels to go, and they would be able to floor it down Main Street and towards Destination 6. Richard relished the thought, hoping he would find Roger and Kevin alive. Flutter, 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 flutter. Something buzzed in his ears. "Look out," shouted the cop nearest to the ground. Richard ducked, but something had already landed on the back of his neck, digging into him with its claws. He started swatting wildly. "Hold still," said the cop one level down. "Hold him still," he yelled to the fourth cop. The fourth cop grabbed Richard to steady him, and whatever was on Richard's neck noticed. It flew off him and stabbed the fourth cop with its stinger. The man stumbled back and buckled over the handrail, falling down the side of the building. Richard threw himself down, and the third cop fired, but missed. Out the corner of his eye, Richard spied the fluttering hornet as big as his palm, its color red and its stinger like a razor blade. It cackled and flew down to assault the third cop, who missed another shot, then threw himself over the handrail before the beast could touch his skin. Richard looked up and saw more hornets, red and gold, perched on the gutters. The golden ones dripped green liquid from their stingers. The red ones just had blades. Richard started down the fire escape. The remaining two cops were already at the bottom. "Get yourself to safety," they called up to him, and one went and checked on the third, who was laying still and lifeless. Then they ran down Main Street, occasionally firing up at the beasts who were now pursuing them. One lingered to attack Richard. It was golden, and its green liquid spattered his shoulders and burned through his t-shirt. Some more of his training kicked in. He gripped the handrail and threw himself over, dangling from the banisters like they were tree branches. He counted to 3 and eyed up the handrail, one landing down from where he stood. He let himself fall and grabbed onto it, now dangling closer to the ground, and the hornet flew after him. Richard locked eyes with its little orange slits, and its toothy mouth salivated as it came for his hands. So Richard let go and fell. He saw a few stacked trash bags before he made impact. Gross, but potentially life-saving. He was happy to land on them. The two cops ahead were set upon by the hornets, stingers plunging into the neck of one and the cheek of the other. Both men fell as Richard rolled off the soft trash bags, which had split open. He was covered in blood and filth, but at least he was alive. The hornets fluttered into the sky as he got to his feet. They guarded the street corner in 8th and Main. Richard didn't know in which direction to run. He couldn't get to Destination 6 if those bugs attacked him. He couldn't even get to his own apartment unless he figured out a way to sneak by. He thought of turning and running further into the town, but just looking at all that smoke and wreckage, he knew he would die not long after. Suddenly there was a roar, and the apartment building he had just escaped from shook. Dust fell, and the fire escape dislodged from the building, tumbling down in sections that all made great squeals. The hornets flew higher into the sky after all that noise, and Richard seized his opportunity. He ran under them, plunging down Main Street, clearing 7th and 6th before his body started pushing back on him. As he slowed, he heard wings fluttering behind him, and adrenaline pushed him further. He cleared 4th and 3rd, and his apartment came into view. Now he knew he would die before he reached Destination 6. So his apartment would have to do. The bottom level was all stone. The stairwell had no windows. He could hide in there if he could just keep ahead of those creatures. When Richard neared his apartment door, he was just about to collapse in pain. There were wings fluttering close behind him now, but even with all the adrenaline, he could barely move without stopping for air. He stopped right next to the warehouse, the one with the Empire State mural, and as always, he felt a sudden compulsion towards the door. canceling out everything. One moment he was heaving, hurting, and fleeing for his life amid the noise of wings. The next, all he could hear was a low whisper in the far corner of his mind. Come inside. The hornet scattered. Shocked, Richard turned and looked up at the sky. The hornets who had just been chasing him were keeping their distance from the warehouse doors. He didn't know why, but he didn't stop to think about it. He ran into his apartment complex, taking advantage of the thick walls. It seemed everyone had already evacuated. He couldn't hear his landlord's television playing in his first-floor apartment. He ran into no one else on the stairs leading up. No, Richard completed the journey towards his apartment with relative ease. For now, he was safe. Whew. Bone chilling. Every time I read it, I tell you. Charles. I love it. I love it. Ooh, need some water. Ah, that's better. Anthony, what's up? How you doing, my man? Good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Please share the video with somebody if you feel like it, somebody who you think might enjoy the book. It's been really great reading with you guys every night. We're coming up on the end of the first week now. I'll be live with you for a bit tomorrow night to read a little bit more. And going forward from that, I think I'll be taking the weekends off, but I'll be back on Monday night and pretty much every night I can be here until we get through the whole book. I think that would be really cool. It would be a new way for you guys to experience it. Well, I am absolutely exhausted, so I am going to log off, and I wish everybody well. And at some point in these readings, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the book and what inspired it and what changes are happening in the author career in general. But for now, if you could just share, and let people know that there's a great free live reading series happening right on Facebook, YouTube right now, would mean the world to me. You guys are awesome. I'm going to play you out with a few quick promos and looking forward to setting up more live streams for you. All right. Good night, everybody.